So that's our next port of call, so to speak. Right after that event in Dubai, the NBS released figures, trade figures for Q3, that's the third quarter of this year. And it showed that within that period, our trade figures showed a trade deficit of 3 trillion naira. So yes, we had total imports at just about over 8 trillion naira, total exports at just over 5 trillion naira. So, I mean, do the math, 8 minus 5. We imported way more than we exported. And that's a breakdown of the countries that we partner with. That's for major import. And as you'll expect, China is top on that list. You have, of course, India, the United States, Netherlands, and Belgium, as well as other countries as well. But those are the top countries there. And from an analysis of the recent figures from the NBS, we have a trade deficit, means that we're importing way more than we're exporting. And that event in Dubai was sort of to export more of, you know, the great potentials we have in Nigeria. You listen to one of the speakers talking about coal. So how do we do this? The figures don't say that, but clearly there is a huge potential. We're joined this morning, as you may have seen, by Mr. Marcel Okeke. He's an economist, and he joins us virtually this morning on the program. Mr. Okeke, it's good to see you again. I know from time to time you get to analyze and look at some of these data and figures because it's what you do, right? And you get inferences from that. So looking at the latest that we got from the MBS, 3 trillion naira trade deficit, what were your initial thoughts?
Thank you very much for having me again this time. The deficit of 3 trillion that you mentioned, that is published by National Bureau of Statistics, is a reflection of the state of things in our economy. It goes to show that our economy is still largely import dependent. Whether you're talking about machinery for industries, whether you're talking about raw materials, whether you're talking about so much of the food that we eat, whether you're talking about the clothing that we wear, footwear, and so on and so forth. So you can keep on counting. So we depend so much on importation. Okay? That's what those figures go to show. So, and we, as an economy and as a country, we've been battling with preference for imported goods in every facet of our life. If you look at back in time, that's what we have been battling with as a country. That most Nigerians who have the ability to pay will prefer to import and use what is coming from outside rather than use made in Nigeria goods. And successive governments over the years have been battling with a kind of reorientation, program to make Nigerians consume what we produce. So the figure you are seeing is typical Nigerian and really tells us where we are as a country. Whether you look at the second quarter or the first quarter of previous years, you will have remarkable difference. As a matter of fact, it will keep getting huge. The gap between what we import and what we export. Okay, if you look at the second quarter, for example, it was 1.something trillion. By the time we move to the third quarter, we're not talking about 3 trillion. By the time we get to the last quarter, you are likely to have a higher figure gap. So that is where we are. That's where we are. Thank you.
So, Mr. Okeke, you've talked about preference, taste, and some would say, well, is it really a matter of taste and preference? And they'll say, if some of these things were available in-house, it's only natural for people to go after them in terms of the right quality and, you know, just meeting the basic standard. So some will say for them, maybe it's not taste, it's just availability. They want to have this thing. It's not readily available, or perhaps the quality they're looking for is not readily available in countries. So, I mean, they look outside. There's also the question of cost as well, the price of these things. Some say that, you know, to purchase some of these things in-house will cost more than, in fact, importing them. Don't forget, they have to pay for importation fees and the rest. They say it even costs cheaper to import these things. So in terms of preference, are you also factoring the cost, the quality, the capacity to produce these things in-house?
Thank you very much. You have said a lot about the Nigerian economy without saying it directly. You know, because when it will cost you an arm and a leg, you know, to produce locally, as a rational human being, you would rather stop production and depend on what is imported. Okay? And that's the investment climate we're talking about, we'll be talking about. Has the government really got a handle, you know, to improving the investment climate? Okay? When so many in recent past and up to now, you know, many companies that you used to know are leaving Nigeria to go to neighboring countries. Is this cost of, you know, production? When I talk about electricity, when I talk about security, when I talk about transportation, when I talk about water, talk about infrastructure generally, everything is in a poor state. And so serious businesses will leave this environment and move to neighboring countries. That's one way to look at it. Okay? The other way to look at it is to assert and reassert the fact that yes, you know, since our colonial days, Nigerians have been used to consuming things that come from outside. You are talking about quality. Of course, you know, if not because of government policy, as we speak today, Nigerians will still be importing toothpick. What technology does it take to produce toothpick? But the government had the willpower this time around to say, no, we'll not be importing toothpick. The government had the willpower to say, we'll not be importing the matches. No matter how poor the quality of what is produced here, let us start. Over time, the quality is likely to improve when we get used to using what we produce locally here.
Number of issues.
You can see it becomes a cultural thing that we are used to doing it this way.
Well, a number of issues are raised.
Simpler master stroke of a policy. Many things, of course, you know the popular but one items. The CBN had to remove from official access, you know, to foreign exchange.
There's the
it's okay. So start looking inwards. So those are the kind of things we should be talking about.
There is the role.
The figures we are looking at.
If you can hear me, there is the role of policies, and then there is the role of enablement, what you know, would call enabling environments for some of these things to get done. Now, we have all seen, I mean, that government is looking for every way, every means whatsoever to raise revenue. And one chief way that government does that is to tax. Taxes, levies, fines, licenses, penalties, and all those things. And there are those who think that, look, there is no way, on the one hand, there is no way to strengthen the Naira, raise our imports without our production capacity or productive capacity of the country or the country's economy growing. So perhaps a good way to begin with, you know, this whole idea of raising our export bill as opposed to our import bill would be improving our production capacity. We've talked about this so many times. Do you think, from the policies that are available vis-a-vis the tax system that is on ground, do you see an enabling environment for our production capacity as a nation to grow, especially speaking from the private sector perspective?
Thank you very much. You know, we are not talking about production per se here. We are talking about the capacity to export Okay? We're talking about the capacity to export. Incidentally, the figures we are going through this morning is indicting a lot of policies and agencies of the government. Okay? Because like you are mentioning, do you know we have export processing zones, free trade zones in this country. There are over 30 of them that are supposed to be facilitating and enhancing export drive. Okay? We also have the Nigeria Export Promotion Commission or Council.
But Mr. Okeke, the question that I'm asking is just a second. The question is, if we are not talking about production, we're talking about exporting. What are we going to export if we do not produce?
Let me come. Yes, you are making a point, but I'm also telling you there are a lot of bottlenecks that we can't even export some of the things we ought to export. If you allow me, I want to quote this statement, made by our own Akinwumi Adesina, who is the president of the African Development Bank, during a recent retreat by the federal government. He said, according to operators in the sector, the cost of exporting 100 tons of cargo in Nigeria is $35,000 compared to $4,000 in Ghana. Today, the leading ports for West Africa are in Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Togo, and Benin Republic. All these countries have modernized their port management system behind, unquote. This is talking about the exports at the ports. What is happening at the ports? So this is part of the environment that's not enabling for people that they have even anything to export. So they are discouraged. Okay? That's the point being made here. It's not a question of things to be exported not being available. This is even an indictment, like I told you, on agencies of government who have to go through these items that are to be exported. You find out that when in their innocence, some people prepare and package their product for export. The people that should go through them to approve the quality and order, they don't do that, or they are compromised, such that when these things get to their destinations abroad, they are rejected and backloaded, or they just rot away there. So the system has a problem. The system has to drive, has to encourage people to export what they have. Okay? So that is the point I'm making here. You are talking about production. Yes, some people can produce even with the harsh environment that we have. So at the end of the day, it is a failure of some agencies of government in terms of encouraging people. Because let me tell you, there is nothing that you have in this country that is not needed somewhere outside this country. Quote me, there's nothing you have in Nigeria, that is not needed somewhere in the world. So if the government agencies encourage people to export these things, they will package them. Somebody will standardize them and approve their quality, and they will be exported and be earning money. Okay? That is why we still have this challenge of almost sole dependence on export of crude oil. Okay? So it needs, government policy and, political will and commitment to drive export so that we can reverse the figures we're looking at. Thank you.
Well, there are those who may also argue against the background of the information that you have given now, which of course, is true. That's what Professor Akinwumi Adesina had said.
Yes.
But then there are those who would also say that perhaps it's a way of government discouraging export so that we can consume what we have in the nation, as opposed to exporting the same things and then finding, difficult to import some other things. What would you say to that? That the raising the export bill would be an attempt by government to discourage exportation so that we can consume what we produce?
I may not agree with you. Our challenge here is not consuming what we produce. And that is why the good test for foreign goods that we talked about. And that's what we are seeing in the figures. But all this, is an indictment somehow, I must say, on the government. They need to have a full development policy, a full development document, development, if you like, call it development plan. Because this is what I'm talking about import and export, and it's not a one-day thing. in economics, we look at this on a long-term basis, okay? So that you don't have these policy somersaults, okay? If you have a plan and an investor keys into the government plan, knowing that it wants to emphasize the exportation of this thing, okay? And that is what those our export processing zones are intended to achieve. But go and look at them, are they working? You know, so when you key in, you start producing those things, knowing that the government is encouraging you to export them, and you produce with the export. I mean the foreign standard, the export standard of quality. You know, take care of everything to make sure that you meet the standard and quality for export. Okay, but what I'm telling you is not in place, and so because of that, we cannot say let's not export. After all, what we are producing is not enough for us. No, by so doing, we are small and therefore limiting ourselves. You understand? You understand? But if you have a policy or that plan in place, which shows a prospective investor where the government is going, you know, via those policies, the person will key in and you start producing for export. Okay? So what are export processing zones for? What are the free trade zones for? You just hear them in names like this. If they are working the way they ought to work, we will have this kind of statistics we are getting from Bureau of Statistics. Okay, so it's not a question of let us not be exporting so that it will be enough for us. No, that is not it. That is not it.
Okay. Well, Mr. Keke, in order to reverse the figures, what would be your recommendation? We understand that, you know, there are the marketing boards for commodities, that the agricultural commodities were supposed to be a lot more effective, but now it would seem that, you know, they are not as effective as they used to be back in time. So that, among several other issues that you have raised, what agencies are in this export value chain that you're talking about, and what are the things they need to do now, and how do you expect government to help in making this process better so that we can export as much as we need to in order to strengthen the Naira?
Thank you. The situation we have on hand now is complex. It's complex in the sense that we have an underlying element, which is the insecurity in the land. Okay? It's complex because we have been used to, and we are still used to, dependence on oil. Okay? It is complex because our constitution does not even allow the subnational government to aggressively go into some areas. Okay? And so on and so forth. So it's a complex situation. And so for us to reverse the figures, as we have now said, and improve our foreign exchange inflow and strengthen the Naira, you can see how it's going. A lot of things have to change. Let's handle the insecurity situation in this country so that we will be able to attract serious, you know, prospective investors who will come in and settle down. Let us start improving the quality, the standard of our infrastructure, okay? So that when you invest here, you can see that Nigeria is a competitive environment, you know, vis-a-vis other, whether neighboring countries or anywhere in the world, okay? So when you have that in place, many people will come in, and then the production of those things you're talking about will come into place. Let me tell you, our challenge over the years and up to now is this issue of making diversification of the economy a mere sing song. Okay, some people will tell you we're already diversified. They go on mentioning how many sectors of the economy we have. That is true, but we're talking about effective diversification. When you diversify effectively, what you're talking about will come about, and that is people producing whatever they are producing, exporting it, and substantially getting foreign exchange earnings, you know, that will make export of crude not to be contributing anything more than 50%, in fact, less than 50% of our foreign exchange inflow. So it is only when we get to that that you can now see the value of the Naira, you know, getting better or improving. And with that, will be this issue of, you know, our penchant for export, for import, so that when we are producing those things, we will be supplying them here, we'll be consuming what we are producing, much of it, and that'll be reducing, you know, the pressure on the naira, because we have to spend so much foreign exchange, you know, have to import so much.
You know, Mr. Okeke, there
So
will always be...
It's a complex issue. So, but it's not something that is done overnight. Government has to be determined, and that is why I'm talking about development policy, that will be a 5-year or 10-year or 15-year or 20-year plan, so that people key into it and consistently move in that direction. And we are at that destination. But
we have to run
being
now.
Done as a makeshift temporary thing, you have policy somersaults. You say something today, by next year, the budget will say another thing. By another year, another government will say another thing. We will continue to have this kind of outcome.
Well, I think that's a great place to anchor. And just to add this banner, that I mean, these figures we're seeing, we don't see the intangibles. Yes, we see in agricultural products, crude oil and the rest, but what about the intangibles like labor exports, you know, the fintech successes we have seen in the country? So we wonder if that also can be factored in subsequently. But we'll wait Q4 figures and hopefully Q1 2022 figures, and if some of these things you talk about are implemented, maybe we can begin to see a surplus. We'd like to thank you so much, Mr. Marcel Okeke, for your thoughts this morning on the program. It's great to see you again.
Thank you, my friends, for having me. Thank you.